With Gallade now banned from menu, take 3. Oh god, of course the natural progression of the tier is, hey, one of the best Pokemon was banned, how do you replace it? And although it's not a one-to-one replacement, and certainly these two Pokemon function pretty differently, I do believe this opens up a lot for Water Tauros, as we'll be calling through the video. This Pokemon was already getting quite a lot better before the ban, even before the suspect test was put up, period. And with the best fighting type now out of the picture, I believe that Water Tauros has a lot of room to really pick up steam. You've already seen a lot of people really turn positive towards its presence, and I think that's just going to accelerate. So we're going to talk about why now today. Of course, if you've been enjoying the content as of late, I need you to do one thing. If you're not yet subscribed, I need you to go down there. I need you to press that button, and I need you to never look back. Leave a like while you're down there too. That's very important. We're on our way, of course, to 10k subs by the end of the year. I'm really close to 9k, and like I said, if we hit 9,000 subs before this month ends, I will give y'all like another hour-and-a-half long video where I just do whatever the hell. So if that interests you, go down there. And, you know, if you just want to support me, go down there. So why Water Tauros? What does this mon do that makes it so good to begin with? Well, one of the things to note is in this tier, there's a little Pokemon. He likes to wrestle, and if you're a VGC player, of course, you're going to have nightmares about that Pokemon, and you're going to hate the fact that I'm bringing it up in singles. Incineroar. Water Tauros is one of the best outright counters to Incineroar in the tier. You resist its dual stab combination, and you whomp that boy right in the head. There's nothing it can do. Even if it wants to Terra, it's not going to save it, you know? There's nothing it can do in return, unless it's like, maybe you have a CC defense drop, and they're, I don't know, Terra Fight Drain Punch? Something weird like that. That's really all it can do back. And so, being able to counter that mon, of course, is huge, but also just having pretty strong priority in this tier is nice. As you look through the list of Pokemon in this tier, having priority for foes like, say, I was going to say Chandelure, but it really doesn't matter that much. But I'll still say Chandelure because maybe you're on a Webs team and you got your boots knocked, right? So like Shandy, Chinchino, Flygon, Infernape, although it's Infernape Lamau, Mienshao, Monkey-Dory, Porygon Z, maybe you're facing an Agility one, Hisui type, maybe it's Scarf. Priority is really good to have, and being able to pick off all of these super fast threats is just really, really crucial. But also, counterplay to this Pokemon isn't the best, and I say this despite us having multiple Pokemon that are good checks to it. Really, it's just a matter of some of them are a little frailer than you'd like, and then others of them aren't at their peak. Now, one of them we'll talk about later might be about to also surge back. If you know, you know. But for now, things really do stand to be quite good for Water Tauros on that front. And of course, too, the other thing is just, as a wall breaker, it is quite hard to answer. Part of that goes back to the checks being pretty frail thing. Another part of that is just, you have such strong moves. You have priority. You're pretty damn fast, all things considered. You're pretty bulky, all things considered. And EQ is quite good coverage. I mean, a lot of your checks do, well, a lot of them. One of them is Dragalge. Dragalge gets hit by EQ. Tentacruel gets hit by EQ. Those are two of your more common checks, and it's pretty convenient coverage. You can even do, like, I'll probably put Zen Headbutt here just for the video, but just no EQs. I prefer it. But I feel like a bulk up. This set, generally, you see a lot more, just because it paired, I mean, with Banded Flygon is one of the easier pairings in the tier. Two reasons for that, really. I mean, one, Flygon's probably the best physical breaker in the tier right now. Probably, yeah. And it's not that your checks overlap a ton, but generally just hitting physical walls is really easy with Flygon. You also end up having two very nice forms of priority. You can have Fimp on the Flygon, and then you can have Jet on Tauros, which makes the need for a Choice Scarf user on your team a lot lower. So that helps for building. Just a very easy mon to support. But also, again, you've got Jet around. That's always really good. And with Intimidate, you got a pretty decent amount of opportunities to find setup. So you can pivot this in versus something like, say, a Copper and it's not too bad. Versus Incineroar, and it's not too bad. Versus a Pert, even, as it's trying to throw up rocks. You're pretty well off. And something like Vapo is a bit of an annoying check, but it has to be Terra Fairy. And so if you roll into Terra Dark, you murk it. Now, Terra Fairy is a lot more common right now, so that's always worth remembering, but it is at least nice that you do have potential odds in that matchup. And then with Bandit, I mean, there's not really a lot to say that we didn't already say. These moves are super, super strong. Jet is really good pryos, and Headbutt has a little bit better coverage than EQ. It's just a little weaker overall, so if you miss Predict, it isn't doing nearly as much. And it can miss, whereas EQ always hits. The benefit to Zen Headbutt over EQ that I'd forgotten, and why it's actually worth mentioning. There's two things, I guess. One, Vileplume. And this is a Pokemon that I do think may start ticking back up in usage for one very obvious reason. The whole point of the video, Gallade's banned. Gallade is one of the reasons Mon was falling off a bit, because it's a fighting type you just can't check, and it's everywhere. There's still plenty of other issues for Plume, but that was one of the bigger ones, so I do think this Mon should come back into the meta a good amount. Because having the Zen Headbutt to hit that is naturally just very, very good, and if you can force it to Terra, well, typically it's Terra types like Fairy or Water, and you have a strong stab move for either of those, so that's really cool. Now, if you want to talk about a little bit of, like, versatility, you could look at this set. One thing we've seen a decent amount is people going Lumberry on their Tauros and then running Wave Crash. I believe this is mostly to have extra room around, not Plume, around Vaporeon and its Scald. But also versus something like Umbreon, it lets you just keep bulking up, and their Toxic will no longer matter. So if they switch in, they're not going to switch in, but if they come out versus you've already gotten a bulk up, and they're about to like Terra Poison to throw off that Toxic, you can just bulk up again. They're going to do nothing, and you're going to smoke them. It's also, of course, good for Talonflame. If they try to fish for Flame Body, you just don't care anymore. Gives you more leverage around a Alolan Muck. If they're trying to hit you, you've got the Lumberry on deck. A little bit less worried about Poison Touch stuff, which is pretty good. Trying to remember if there's anything else Lum is good for. Keys, that's another one. If they're trying to just throw off that Panic Thunder Wave, you no longer care about that, which is also really good. Of course, the difference between this variant and the original with Boots Raging Bull is you have a lot worse durability, which is kind of funny because I put a Lumberry on here. But the fact remains, it is still worse durability overall because you are taking all that recoil from your Wave Crash. You don't have Boots as well to offset the hazards. Now, a potential other variant, you could do like, I'll throw a mention of like Leftovers is still a fine item on this. Maybe even better on this one, you know what? I'll keep the Leftovers for all my Leftovers supporters in chat. Leftovers, and then you can go like Trailblaze. So naturally, this variant is probably not worth running a ton because you've got Aqua Jet literally right there. And at this point, I'd probably use Blaze Tauros. But Water Tauros could still do it pretty alright. Turning into a grass type has got some advantages, of course, compared to just staying a water type. Main thing being that water type, still weak to grass. Grass type, not weak to grass. So that could be potentially useful if you're staring down like a Bramblegast or something. It really is a lot harder for that mon to do much to you if you just keep bulking up. Like, yeah, it has strength stat, but it's not going to beat you long term usually. This can be pretty cool, of course, for that. Also helps versus something like a Flygon if you wanted to have like a super free turn to set up on it. You could Terra Grass, resist the EQ, and then take 0. Main issue with Terra Grass is that a lot of mons you normally would set up on now just destroy you. So like it gives you a little bit of leverage in some matchups, but I think you lose a little bit too much otherwise. So we keep it with the Boots, with the Bull, because I do think Raging Bull is strong enough. If you care about doing a lot of damage on one turn, just CC something, bro. So next up, of course, oh, I should mention too, Scarf is still good. And he doesn't have like a lot of great Scarfers that people love to use. Scarf on Water Tauros is certainly viable. If you're looking for replacing Aqua Jet, I would probably just say throw like, I don't know, there's a lot of moves you could do. You could do like Lash Out. That way you have a better move to hit Bramblegast with. If you really wanted, you could do like Stone Edge just so you have the Talonflame move that doesn't make contact. Those are probably your best options. And of course you could do Terra Fight if you wanted at that point. Because Terra Fighting, a little bit better to spam than Wave Crash. You could even, if you wanted, you could do Raging Bull here and have double water move. This way you've got your option to just revenge kill and then your option to, like, revenge kill when they're a lot healthier. So, both are pretty good. I don't think you can really go wrong with either. Let me go back to this, actually. I need to look at Pokemon that check you now. So, checks. Araquanid. Now, if you do have a rock move, Araquanid is no longer a check. And Araquanid's not really a good check to begin with because it doesn't do anything to you. So if you're bulk up Tauros, you set up forever and you win. But I mean, hey, it at least checks the stabs. If you're a choice lock Tauros, maybe Araquanid's a little more annoying than usual. But I don't believe it's switching in consistently more than like one time. Avalugg, I will mention here, even though it's an ice type, because if you were playing earlier in new metas, you understand. Avalugg checks any physical attacker. Any. It's just a fact of life. He's big lug. He will Terra into a poison type, and you will lose. Basculegion's another good check, but it's kind of another case of, okay, but what do you really do back? Because the Tauros could wave crash you still, and it's going to do a decent amount of chip. And so what, you want to just keep trading wave crashes? One of you will perish along the way, and if the Tauros got a bulk up somewhere along that process, maybe it bulked up as the Legion came in, Tauros is going to come out on top. The only real thing you have to be worried about is like a lash out. You know, not like the scariest thing. Brambleghast, another good check. Like I said, Sap spam probably doesn't really beat you, but it's a decent mon to force mutual annoyance. As the both of you just stare down the other person and say, God damn it, just switch. Please. Cresselia is a pretty good check as well. Not that it's an amazing switch in, but it is one of the best just checks to any physical attacker in the tier because it's so bulky. Main issue Cress has is it's so weak that Water Tauros can bulk up like an extra time versus you, and if it has Terra available, it can bulk up several extra times versus you and in two shot. Obviously, if you don't have your Terra available, it becomes a little less favorable. And Cresselia, maybe Cress is like Terra Fairy, right? And has that extra Moonblast power. That could be a bit annoying. Otherwise, it's kind of like, meh, who cares? I'm going to set up on you, like I said, I'm going to Terra Water. Maybe even your Terra Steel. I didn't even throw that as I mentioned, but Steel's always generically good on these types of Pokemon. There's a lot of weirdness in that matchup for sure. If you hear the dog, I'm so sorry. She doesn't know any better. Diancie is like technically a check if they want to defensively Terra, but they have to have Moonblast to do anything. And right now, I don't really see a lot of Moonblast Diancie. If we're talking like the defensive sets, I see usually Encore because people want that Cresselia insurance, and just generic bulky setup counterplay is always necessary on the teams you'll see that sort of Diancie on. Dragalge, like we said earlier, it is technically a check. And in some ways, Dragalge is a little bit better than some of the others. Like, Tentacruel, for example, struggles to really do a lot back to Tauros because it's not very strong, and it honestly drops Sludge Bomb a decent amount at a time. So maybe you have Toxic, in which case you gotta hope it's not like Lumberry Tauros, right? If it is, Toxic won't do anything, and then you just look really silly. Dragalge, on the other hand, bulky enough to where you're not just getting smoked unless it's, again, banded Tauros with coverage for you, predicting you on the switch. Dragalge does a lot of damage back with Drake or Sludge Bomb. I think Drake one-shots Tauros with, like, minimal investment needed, which is pretty good. And, of course, Sludge Bomb will do a lot. If it's Terra Steel Tauros, then you just say that they match up fished you, and you then call them, like, I don't know, call them a jackass and leave. Seems pretty reasonable to me. Espeon's a check because it is faster and has psychic moves. Hope that didn't require a lot of thought. I'm not going to talk about Galvantula as a check. I don't respect that mention at all. Klefki, it's a check insofar as having T-Wave, but that's really all it does. Quagsire is a good check to bulk up, but it will get run down by Banded very, very quickly. You will get close combated on the switch, take like 60. You'll then feel like you want to defensively Terra. The problem is now, the next time you switch in, you will get Wave Crashed twice and die. Yay! Pert's kind of a check. The problem is you have to be Roar, because otherwise Bulk Up just sets up in front of you and it doesn't care about Earthquake. Then this brings up the issue of, well, guess what? Roar Pert's a little less common than it once was, because with how common Bronzong is now, of course, teams start now turning to, okay, well, if people are going to spam Zong, we want to make sure we can punish Zong as adequately as possible. So knockoff Swampert's a lot more common right now than Roar, because you can knock the Zong's lefties off as it switches in, then flip turn out, and the Mon's pretty neutralized. So, I'll say, yeah, Roar Pert's less common now, so it's a little bit more setup fodder than it used to be. Sylveon technically is a check, but you have to keep it at full health, and you never switch, like, directly in. It just does not go well. Tentacruel's a check, like we said earlier, but there are some worrying things Tauros could do, like be Terra Steel, have a Lumberry, and then you're pretty screwed, but still a check's a check. Serena, I guess, is a check, but CC does so much, I don't even really consider it one. Terra Fairy Vaporeon is an outright counter. There's nothing Tauros can really do. You could tech Iron Head on the Bandit, I guess, but that's about it. And I think Lash Out, if you want to run a more niche attack, has more general application than something like Iron Head. So at that point, just run like a designated Vapo Beater, for example, and you're usually going to be better off. And of course, Vileplume, great Tauros counter. I say counter even though technically there's Banded Zen Headbutt, but you switch into literally every other thing Tauros can do incredibly consistently. And you always have effect Spore to punish. And you've got Helmet potentially, although, like I was talking about earlier, how Plume still has some issues. One of them's Banded Flagon. 2 shots you with EQ, with hazards up, so boots are kind of better. And of course, I am going to go down to PU as well. Technically, Altaria is a check, but we do not count this Mon. Bellabolt's kind of a check just because the Mon is really, really bulky, and Volt Switch or Parabolic Charge is plenty to threaten Tauros afterwards. The only issue is Bellabolt's not really that common. And yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of the same thing with Plume in the Flagon matchup, where Bellibolt in the Tauros matchup does run the risk of getting overwhelmed when hazards are up if you're facing Banded. But generally, you're going to be fine into it. Decidueye is a check. It's just Decidueye in current NU. I don't think that requires a lot of elaboration. Gastrodon, very, very similar to Vaporeon, where if you're Storm Drain with like Terra Poison or Fairy, or Ghost, all three of those are pretty fair game, then you just counter Tauros, there's nothing it can really do. Gligar, I guess you could kind of count as a check, but it's like, okay, well, I'm Terra Water, and I never... It's a check, again, we're talking like insofar as you have Toxic, it could throw that off. But that's all you're doing, and it's a very bad... Like, this should not be your counterplay. If it is, you are getting smoked by Tauros, and you will deserve it. Houndstone, Houndstone counts as a check. You could Wisp the Tauros. With Fluffy, you don't really care. That's really all I can say. Milotic, especially if you can bait, like, status onto you, Milotic ends up being a pretty decent answer. You've got Scald to threaten burns. You potentially have Haze if you're scared of setup. At that point, man, just Scald burn. You chill. I feel like we got a couple more checks. Yeah, we do. Glowbro, kind of a check. It's just Banded Wave Crash does a million. And then if you Terra into like a water type, Banded CC does a million. So it's pretty brutal. Not the worst answer, just not one of the better ones. Venusaur is just very uncommon at this point, so I don't really consider it valid. Wo-Chien is a check if you Terra, because Tablets of Ruin and how much bulk this Mon has, you will be able to check the Tauros pretty decently well. So that's a good option to think about as well. You just kind of have to be cognizant of its limitations in terms of how many teams it fits on. And was there anything else I wanted to mention from down in the depths of ZU? There was, right? I just got to get down to him. He's coming. I guess you could count Terra Water Palisand as an okay answer. It's just, again, kind of similar to some of your other ones where you're reliant on Perfect Prediction and Terra. So it's very, very, very inconsistent as a check. Quillfish is a check, but we don't talk about that, Mon. Where is it? Come on. God, why are you so far down? There he is, Toxicroak. Toxicroak is technically... Fucking rolling all over my words, man. Please subscribe, help me. But Toxicroak is technically a check. Dry Skin means you're completely immune to the water moves. You resist CC. If they Zen Headbutt you, GG, bro. You just say that. Yoshi Toxicroak has. If Tauros is ever at +1, or if it's banded, CC 2 shots you. So Bandit Tauros will never lose to Croak, really, unless Croak only switches in on water moves, pretty much. So it's one of those checks where you're like, oh, do I really like this? Not really. But it is definitely still like an okay enough answer. And then, hey guys, Wheezing, I'm sure checks this mon great, Copium. But I hope y'all enjoyed. Water Tauros is definitely fixing to turn into one of the best mons in the tier, I believe. It was already getting a ton of attention. And with the ban of Gallade, I think a lot more people are going to now have to look at this mon and say, alright, what can you do? Because what's the other options, right? Breloom? Breloom's pretty good, but I just think it's not good. It's never going to be the meta, in my opinion, at least. Infernape is pretty mid, unless you're me using specs, then of course it all of a sudden turns into the best mon in the tier. But like, you know, again, it's not like a mon that I really think would contest for best fighter in the tier. Mienshao, I don't know why. I'm closer to saying Mienshao's an A- rank Pokemon than like returning to form at that S+, like A+ threshold spot. It's really weird. Are there any other fighting type that I was trying to think of? I feel like there was one and I just all of a sudden don't remember. Heracross, I guess I could throw a mention up too a bit, because Heracross, something about Guts Hera in a Plume meta sounds very, very enticing. But, of course, we'll have to wait and see to see what the meta does. I hope y'all enjoyed. Let me know down below, what Pokemon are you most looking forward to using now that Gallade is banned? I've got a couple that I want to use. As y'all saw, my builder had a couple mons up top, or teams up top that's just one mon. I just want to, yeah, I'm just trying to see some stuff. But until next time, hope y'all have a great time with whatever you're doing in life. I'll catch you then. Peace.